You'll be able to hear camera, you won't be able to see her because you're literally sat, Joe, you're right next to the camera, so your audio will be audible to the camera. Yes, you can voice your opinions at any time. So today, I'm actually doing a YouTube collaboration with the beautiful Joe. You'll just be able to hear her, like I said, you won't be able to see her. But today we're doing Samantha March eyeshadow palette tag, I'll just say that. And I believe her video is a collab video as well. I just can't remember who she's collabing with. I want to say it's someone called Ali. Whole video concept, we have 12 questions and all this will be in the description box below, as well as all the links to Samantha's video, as well as Joe's video, because Joe's video should probably be up around the same time, if not before mine. I'll have all that information down below. The whole list is 12 questions long. I've got 11 palettes because one palette overlaps, but I tried to have individual palettes. Well, technically I actually do have 12, but 2 palettes count as one palette. It will make sense in a second. Okay, so what is my newest palette? So newest palette, there's a little story about this. This is the Hojo Art Silky Eyeshadow Palette. Ooh, fancy. It says it on the front and it's got like some gold reflect and all sorts of fun stuff. It's supposed to be a Pat McGrath dupe palette. I bought this off of Wish. They don't sell anywhere else other than places like Wish or Amazon or Alibaba, AliExpress, that type of dealio. Which is frustrating because I'd like to be able to buy it from an actual website and feel like it's a trustworthy thing. But it's also equally like, well, if they're selling it through these websites, you don't really have an option. This is the actual colour story of the palette. See how it's kind of reflective, but this green up here is like a duochrome thing, so it goes like from a off gold to green. Swatch it. So you can see, like, it's so beautiful. I was showing Joe just before. You can kind of see, I'm kind of in frame in both. I technically paid for it. Thought it had been like 3 months, it had never shown up. I had then been like, okay, Wish, I need a refund. Nothing's shown up. Literally like 2 days after the refund was processed, this arrived. So, I mean, if you're watching Wish, you can get your money. It was like 30 bucks. I don't mind paying for it, but technically I got this for free. That's my first palette, my newest palette. I can kind of remember what the questions are just looking at the palettes now. Next palette is my oldest palette. This happens to be the Urban Decay Heavy Metals palette. And the packaging is designed to look like a bit of crushed metal. Joe's already seen this, and if you've watched my makeup collection video, you've seen this palette, as well as all of the other palettes you've been seeing in this, but this is just answering questions. And this palette actually slides out. It's got like it's a plastic sleeve, and then this is the actual palette itself. I'm trying not to blind you with reflections, while also showing camera. So you can see this side is colourful, and then this side is all neutral type shimmers. This was the first palette I ever bought. I think I bought this late 2018, so like old. Like this was my first ever eyeshadow palette. And the reason why this is also kind of a bad purchase as a first palette, that it's only shimmers, no mattes, so not much to work with. Like I bought this alongside my first ever pot of MAC Painterly paint pot and a single eyeshadow brush. This eyeshadow brush from Mecha Maxima. I've jacked it up by cutting it up and all sorts now, but this is a Mecha Maxima brush. I had this palette, and the MAC paint pot was my first ever proper makeup purchase. Like I'd purchased makeup before, but it was like a lipstick or two every so often, and it was usually cheap. I bought some MAC, but it had got stolen, and then after that I had lost like interest in buying makeup for a couple of years, and then eyeshadow palette later on in this re-spurred my like love for makeup and purchasing, and I'll get to that later. The third question, what is your most expensive palette? Pat McGrath. I think it's called the Pat McGrath Mothership Subversive Metalmorphosis eyeshadow palette. And this eyeshadow palette is a 6-pan palette using her like stunning opulent packaging where it's all like a little box where it's almost got like a manila envelope type seal at the front. Look at the shadows. All shimmer palette. So all the shimmer palette, this is great paired with mattes. Obviously that's a bit obnoxious to say considering it's a bloody 120 Australian dollar palette. You shouldn't have to get another palette to pair with it. But I mean, for Pat's formula, if you're wanting to pay a little bit more money but not go with the cheaper palette that I will also be showing later on, but it's not this type of packaging, this is a nicer option if you want to have that little bit of opulence in Australia but you're not willing to spend $200 or more on one of her bigger 10-pan palettes. The next palette is my most affordable palette, and this is also brought up as a second option later on. My most affordable palette is the Colourpop Smoke Show palette. And Joe actually was lovely enough to gift me this beautiful palette. And this also is a bit of a memorable thing that I want to keep because this doesn't exist anymore. Coloured Rain owns a trademark for the name Smoke Show, and Colourpop was big dum-dum, didn't bother to do any legal bullshit and check, and then Coloured Rain was like, oh hell no, stop it. It's called the Blowin Smoke palette. This is also mentioned later on and I'll talk about why in that part, but this is the colour story of the palette. So it looks quite cool. Grey, blacks. I won't say more until later on, and you'll find out why. Moving on. I think the next question then would be my everyday type palette. This is a bit of a difficult question for me because I don't actually wear makeup in my everyday. As you probably can tell, like I'm barefaced right now. I did have makeup on earlier, and that's why I'm not doing anything now because I don't want to do 2 times of makeup and removal. The palette that if I were to wear makeup every day, and Jo will actually corroborate that, and she knows that I would, this isn't just me saying it for the sake of the video. The Venus Immortalis palette from Lime Crime. This would be what I would say is my everyday palette. It is super compact. You can see my hands. It's not my smallest palette. Beautiful packaging. Thank you, camera. This also glows in the dark. The palette itself, 8 shades, and very versatile shades for my skin tone, and they are like, it's almost like a cool neutrals palette with a little bit of colour with the shade Unveil where you get that kind of red undertone, but everything else is very cool, very neutral, does gorgeous glam moments. I love it. Next question is my most colourful palette, and that would have to be the ever controversial Jeffree Star Jawbreaker palette. This is when it's going to get horrifying for everyone watching at home. Oh, what happened? You will see this as well as one of his other palettes later on. Removed all the pans for travel purposes. You'll see it in my biggest palette. It's technically multiple palettes all put together. No pans in this. I keep the packaging because it's pretty, even though people be like, why would you keep it if he's gross or whatever, you depotted it. Even though he's controversial, I want to build a kind of little makeup museum of all the grotty people in the makeup world as well as like the good makeup people, and be able to be like, that person's shit, that person's cool, this is what they did then, this is what they did now. And like, I mean, at the time I bought it, I've already got it. I'm not going to be purchasing it again. I kind of would prefer to know that like it's going to some kind of use for me personally. It'd be cool to have, and it's not taking up landfill. I kind of argue one of the palettes is smaller than this, but I just use this as my smallest palette. This is the Wonder Beauty Wondrous Rush palette. What a little tongue twister. Wonder Beauty Wondrous Rush. Ugh. Try and say that 5 times fast. Not going to. This is a nice cute little palette. Very handheld, very compact. Like you can literally see, even compared to the Lime Crime palette in size, you can see that the Wondrous palette, much more compact. Just a kind of like another glam type moment, just a little bit more warm. This is technically my biggest palette, even though there's 2 of them. They're heavy as hell. These are my Model Rock Shadow Bibles. These are what I've depotted all of my Jeffree Star Cosmetics palettes in to make them easier for storage and traveling with. So like they're like, I've sorted them out by colours. So there's 5 in each Bible, so 10 platters in total. I'm not picking up the 5th because 2 had difficult, but you can kind of see the different colours and tones in the platters. It makes it significantly easier when we're able to travel. Like I plan when I eventually do get to travel, it's going to be a lot easier taking 2 of these, which have literally all of my Jeffrey eyeshadows in it, than taking all of his palettes in the big packaging, and it would just be ridiculous over the top. This is a kind of nicer way to be able to use my stuff without it being so obnoxiously Jeffrey. All my Jeffrey shadows in here, and that's why I kind of count him as my largest palette, because look at it, they're ridiculous. Next palette, your most memorable palette, but another controversial type palette is, you know, Jeffrey. This is the Jeffree Star Cosmetics Blue Blood palette, and the main reason why this is like my most memorable palette, and what I was mentioning before, this was the palette that really got me back into makeup. You can't see it because, you know, I've ripped out the pans, but it has gorgeous blues and greens. I can actually show you some of the blues and greens and stuff now. The actual palette itself, it was released in Australia. Oh, it was released at 10 AM on the 29th of March in 2019. And the reason why I know the date so specifically is because it was released on the 30th of March at 3 AM in Australia, which was my birthday. And this was the first palette. Not all of these are from that, but there's a lot that from Blue Blood. If you know Blue Blood, you can see it. Like that shade there, that shade there, you got this shade, you got that shade, you got one of these. Like, you can tell quite easily if you have used Jeffree shadows. Like I said, this is kind of like my most memorable palette because I just love blues, and this was gorgeous, and the blues and greens that were in this, as well as the other tones, work really well with my skin tone. And it was released on my birthday. What more can you really say than it is my literal birthday palette? Some people say his packaging is childish and obnoxious, and I'm like, how is this childish? I don't see it as childish personally. Like, how is a $54 American or like $80 Australian palette childish? Palette worth the hype. I kind of reworked this one. Palette was the palette that not necessarily had a lot of hype around it, but it solidified the hype for the brand, is what I'm kind of working this as. And for me, first ever Pat McGrath purchase, which is this, the Pat McGrath Eye Ecstasy Subversive eyeshadow palette. Joey, I don't know, do you have the colourful one, or do you only have the neutral toned one?
I have the neutral.
Okay. Pat released 2 of these. They're a 5-pan eyeshadow palette, and I got the colourful one, as you can see, and there's also a full neutral toned one. This is, I believe, like $20-something in America. This is like $44 Australian, which for Pat's formula, considering, you know, my literally most expensive palette is this, and that's not even that large of a palette. This is literally one more eyeshadow, just with prettier packaging. $120, $44. Same brand. I bought this first, and this is the palette that made me purchase this, because the formulas. The palette that wasn't worth the hype. This is the only palette that is a repeat. The only reason why, I'm not discounting this one, I'm not doing the same like worth the hype with the Pat palette. This wasn't worth the hype just for the palette itself. This isn't for the Colourpop brand, because I do love other Colourpop products, like their coloured eyeliners and mascaras. They're great. But this, the main reason why I didn't like it, it looks all grey and all that, but for some odd reason on my skin, it pulls blue. I don't want, and they're not nice blues, they're like weird grey blues. And if I want grey blues, I want it in a good formula, and these just aren't a good formula for grey blues compared to like the grey blues that were in Blue Blood. So this wasn't worth the hype that was surrounded the fact that, like, I want more of the monochromatic palettes from Colourpop, especially their like pastel ones, even though I think I can't actually get them because checking them, they have carmine. They need to stop. Yeah, palette that wasn't worth the hype. Smoke show.
You're making it a game. think you said 12 questions. Isn't it 13?
You are correct. It is 13. Thank you for correcting me. Yes, it is 13. Next question though is, what is favourite palette from a favourite brand right now? And that currently is this beauty, the Ace Beauty Paradise Fallen palette. And I mean, first of all, can we appreciate the packaging? I'm sorry, I was just showing the camera the point of like makeup. And do you blame me? Like, just look at that. Absolutely stunning. This is quite compact, very small, gorgeous packaging, insane pigmentation. Like, the pigmentation in this matches, if not outperforms, Jeffree's formula, especially for purples. And I mean, you see the purples. And for all of you people that were saying that you didn't like the Bloodlust palette because it wasn't purple enough, this is purple enough. Trust and believe. Beautiful. It's not that expensive. This is like $50-something Australian, which for, I think it's £10, 12. Can I maths? Yes, I can maths. It's £12. For a £12 palette, $50 Australian. So that'd probably be like 25-30 American for you, I believe, yeah? Yeah, so I cannot complain for that price. Really, let's be real. And when you're getting packaging that looks this stunning, where it's on the level of like things of like Pat McGrath and Jeffree's type packaging for $50, you can't complain. Last but not least, lucky question number 13, your most used palette. I haven't really posted a lot of like photos of me actually like using the makeup, but that doesn't mean I haven't used it. And I've hit pan one of the shadows in this already, or considering I've only owned this for a couple of months. Stargem Cosmetics Support System palette in collaboration with the beautiful Jen, or Jersey Unicorn 82. I'll leave their information down below as well. But this palette itself is a 9-pan palette of beautiful gorgeousness. You can see the shadow that I've already hit pan on, shade Journey. This colour story, it's great, it's small, compact, but it has my favourite colours, especially to use together. Look at that glitter, this glitter here. It is absolutely stunning. This shade up here, this is the second iteration of the palette. I've got first and second, but the third iteration of the palette that has come out, the shade Jenna Lee, I'll show it again, which is this darker purple colour in the palette. That is being replaced with a duochrome type shade. And then the front of this currently is a sticker that is on the top of this packaging. But the newest version of it, this design, is actually printed and blown up on the front of the palette. That's it. That's all the palettes. That's all the 13 palettes that go along with each question, from favourite palettes to not worth the hype, to the most memorable, to the most colourful, to everyday, to, you know, your most expensive, to your newest and oldest. Like, look at me go. It was so difficult to try and do and not drop everything. Thank you so much for watching all of that craziness. Thank you so much to Joe, again, for always collaborating with me and joining me on my lives whenever I go live, and I also love to join yours. We did one earlier today when I'm filming this. We actually went live on her channel and then went live on Zach, which I'll also leave his information in the description box too. We always like going live on each other's channels and all sorts. It's a great way to build a sense of community, and it's a lot better than just talking via comments on each other's videos. It's really nice to be able to have this small type of community that Joe and I have been able to find, where we actually get to interact with each other in real time in like a video type setting, or at least a lot of us get to when it comes to the panels, because we've had people that don't even do YouTube videos come on the panel, like Christy and stuff like that. So it's been great being able to have someone to actually bounce off of in real time, and it's not just, you know, we're sitting in the middle of a room with a blank wall behind us talking to a camera. Thank you so much for watching. I'm now going to try and take photos to show us the thumbnail. Joe gets to watch the hilarity, that will be that, and you will get to see the end results as the thumbnail. So, thank you again. See you later. Bye!